All right, Wordle. I'll resist the urge to play Quordle over here in the corner. I talked about this word last week and I made the statement that God cannot be appeased. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of appeasement. I have a pretty negative view of it because in the pagan world of ancient times, you appeased gods by giving them things that they needed, like food or whatever. Or you engaged in rituals that would then cause them to mimic the rituals. There's this mechanistic and manipulative nature to the way that their rituals work. And that by the act of doing the ritual itself, your God would then you could move your God, you could incite your God to do something on your behalf, like make it rain or whatever, or provide kids, which explains, growing crops, which explains the existence of fertility cults. The idea was with those fertility cults was you perform certain ritualistic acts, sexual acts in the temple, and that would incite the gods to be fertile for you in terms of crops or something like that. I mean, it sounds ridiculous when we say it, but in our century. But I suppose if you were looking into your third year of famine and starvation was everywhere during the for example, during the plague of 1346 and 7, or 47 and 48, I can't remember. And in that period of time, a third of Europe died. I mean, it was a wholesale Holocaust. Whole villages wiped out. Your whole family gets wiped out. They find these graves with everybody in a family in it. It's 5 or 6 bodies. 3 of them are kids, little kids or something. And so the people in the midst of the trauma and the desperation would engage in these rituals of self-flagellation, where they would whip themselves till they were bloody in a ritualistic show of repentance. Because they figured that the plagues were happening because they were sinful. And that if they showed their penance, repentance is another word I'm looking for. Sorrow, regret, remorse, whatever, that it would incite God to hold off his hand. And that's the sort of thing that I'm getting at with this idea of appeasement, because it's manipulative and it's ritualistic. And the pagans believed that the act itself, just by performing the acts themselves, the ritualistic acts, they could incite the gods, they could move the gods to do certain things. And it was impersonal. It's not like it would bear any connection to anything else they did, like how they lived their lives. It's just simply go in, perform the ritual, and then the gods would act favorably because of it. And that's the part where we part company with the pagan, or one of the places where we part company with the pagans, that God cannot be appeased in that sense, that there is no ritual that you can perform, the act of which itself will move God. And that includes also, obviously, the sacrifices that the Israelites were commanded to engage in. There's what is it, Numbers 28, Deuteronomy 15, these chapters with all these sacrifices. Were they just ritualistic? No, it was expected that they were an outward sign of a life of the nation. And only when the life of the nation was of a certain kind would those sacrifices matter to God. You see that in the Psalms too. Sacrifice thou hast not desired, and so on and so on. A contrite heart is what you desire. That's what's assumed to go with the sacrifices. And so, in Isaiah, he's finally going to say, I've had enough of your sacrifices. They make me sick. I don't want them anymore. Because the mindset that was supposed to come with them didn't come. And so I suppose they assumed, like the rest of the pagan gods, that if they performed the sacrifices ritualistically, that it would move God in certain ways. And he said, I'm not one of those gods. I'm the creator, and I cannot be appeased in that sense. So when he finally wanted an act that would matter, that would satisfy his wrath, the act was performed by him and by himself in the person of Jesus Christ. And what came with it is a life worthy of the sacrifice. So a lamb unblemished, spotless, unstained, in the words of Peter, I think, offered himself. Jesus, without blemish, offered himself, and the result was satisfaction of God's wrath. So he comes in after I just say that. He's going to come in and sit down. So this word here, appeasement, the act or action of appeasing, I've never understood why they put a definition that includes the word like that, but they always do. Policy of appeasing an enemy or a potential aggressor by making concessions. Yeah, that's not us. The state of being satisfied, appeased. Yeah, it could be the state of being satisfied, but the point being, not by any ritual in and of itself, but by the self-sacrifice of the Lamb of God, the unblemished Lamb of God. So if you think of him as the unblemished animal who offers himself, there's even that language in Hebrews, then you're getting closer to more of, I think, what Christians think of as propitiations, which we'll talk about when we get there. I should have just talked about this when we get there at the end of this chapter, but I did it now. But we'll go back and revisit that idea of a propitiation because of the way this chapter is going to end. So we're on about, let's see, 6? Does that sound right? The doves? The animal, the birds? Yeah. All right. We've come through the flood. And in a world in turmoil and chaos, Noah's made a soft landing, if you will, as we talked about last week. Not a hard, he didn't crash into the mountain. He didn't crash land, it was a soft landing. And now he doesn't know, he's entirely in the hands of God, and he's alone on the face of the earth. Him and his the seven other souls in the ark. And he's going to open a door to the unknown in a new world, which will not be stable like the old world. It will still be there, but not stable. We're going to talk about that again too. So let's just pick it up and continue right where we left off there, I think. Then it came about at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark, which he had made, and he sent out a raven. That's great. You're going to appear right now after I finish talking about appeasement. So okay.
God knew.
And he sent out a raven, and it flew here and there. It's a great expression. Until the water was dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove from him to see if the water was abated from the face of the land. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot. So she returned to him in the ark, for the water was on the surface of all the earth. Then he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark to himself. So he waited yet another 7 days. And again, he sent out the dove from the ark. Pretty important dove. That dove plays a pretty important part in the history of redemption. Dove came to him toward evening, and behold, in her beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So you have a divinely ordained dove who fulfills a need by the hand of God. This is as if God is communicating directly with Moses. They don't have cell phones, they don't have radar, they don't have drones. Oh, what he wouldn't have given for a drone. But he does have a dove and the Almighty above the dove. So the dove goes out, finds the dry land, picks an olive leaf, undoubtedly divinely directed, and brings it back to the ark. What's one of the important elements of that story, of course, is the dove should have never come back. It's a dove. When it finds a place like that, that's where it's going to stay. There's no reason for the dove to come back to the ark unless the dove was under the direction of God somehow. And so I think that's the deliberate implication. There's a great example of the difference between subject matter, the distinction between subject matter, meaning, and implication. So the subject matter is this story, which is very simple. Dove goes out, dove comes back with an olive leaf. What does the story mean? The story means that there's dry land out there. which is the part that the author wants to communicate. What he also wants to communicate is, or he communicates without necessarily consciously meaning to, that will be implication. Although you can have, I'm thinking about this too hard. One of the implications of the story is that God is communicating to Adam. God is communicating to Noah through the dove. So God is involved in this story, even though he's never mentioned here. So we are how many verses? All we have is that God remembered Noah. And then after that, he's not mentioned for quite a while. And so you're going to get the story of the drying up of the land because God remembered Noah. So he's going to dry up the land, and he's going to communicate to Noah through the dove. But he's never going to be mentioned, I don't think, after verse 1. He's going to come in again later, right here in verse 15, I guess. Is that the first one? First time? Yes. So he's not mentioned, I don't think, between 1 and 15. Yeah. You get rid of this floating controls here. So, it's a literary style. He's not in the text, but he is visible, if you will. He is manifested in the drying of the land and then in this dove.
And I think another part of the understanding of the narrative is the application then to us. After we get through all of this, what God implies in the text, and then how can I take it and live it out in my life?
Did you want to say something now about that?
Well, I can. I mean, God doesn't forget us. I mean, there are a lot of.
I would make that even more. I would make that application even more direct.
Well, yeah.
Because everybody here knows how I feel about application. Well, most of you do. That unless it's implied in the text, I don't talk about it. Not that it's not true.
No.
Yeah. So, but I would get there this way. I would say that in remembering Noah, when he says God remembered Noah, he means God remembered. He did not write off. He did not abandon the human race among which we are. So to this day, you have this, in this story implied, you have this creator who I was just about to say that his name is not in the text between these two verses, but he's all over the events, hovering like a creator working out his plan. He didn't step away and disappear. You kind of get that picture in the 400 or so years between Jacob's arrival in Egypt,
Genesis 15, Exodus.
and then and then God's reappearing in Exodus chapter 3 to Moses, and there's this gap, and you get this period of silence where it seems as if God has stepped back and has not involved himself among the people because they're going to become a pagan nation in the meantime. But let's assume that that's true. Yet there he is, like this, superintending and waiting from our perspective, waiting until his moment, and then he's going to come down and make his move. And that's exactly, he's going to do all these things to wipe out everything on the planet, but very carefully make sure, it's easy for him, it's not hard, very carefully make sure that Noah is kept safe. And then he gets a soft landing. That's the creator that Noah had, and that's the creator that we have today. And it's even more so when you consider the chaos that this world has now, the invisible chaos. It feels sometimes like we're in the eye of a hurricane. I felt that way in the 2020 during the writing, the three month summer of love, manifested by mostly peaceful fires all over the
Antifa.
Yeah. By people concerned about racial justice. But we didn't get it. So you can feel sometimes it doesn't feel real because it feels like it's like we're in the eye of a hurricane. Until you get to the other end of the eye, and here comes the hurricane, because that happens in a hurricane. It'll be bad, and then it'll calm, and then you think, okay, it's all right, and then here comes the back end. Hey, you guys still out there? Nate, Naomi, Gabe?
Hi.
Yeah, my computer just crashed.
Okay, okay, good, because okay, no problem.
I have no idea why. It's never happened before. Let's see if it does. Let's see if it happens. Kind of curious about how Zoom would handle it. But got to remember that the session is started on Zoom, not on my computer. So the session is still going and it just figures it all out. Okay. Anyway, yeah, said recording in progress. Now let's see if it can figure out to get rid of the space between the two. The blank space, the blank 60 seconds or 90 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it was. Okay. I was talking about something that was probably irrelevant. Instability and so forth. We were talking about God manifesting himself in the dove. And, you know, the modern application is the same one. Noah was intensely aware of God's presence, ever presence, and power. He not only brings his IQ, if you will, his omniscience into the picture, to bear on this. He brings his omnipresence and omnipotence as well. It's precisely in the flood. Next to the creation story itself, the flood is probably the plate and the incarnation, which I consider to be the greatest miracle in the history of the world. But he brings his power to bear and his presence to bear on planet Earth more directly in the flood than he does at any other time in history, except for the creation and the incarnation, in my mind. And right now it's manifested in that dove right there. So if you're Noah, you send this dove out. And you go, well, what do we do now? And I mean, he doesn't have a clock to look at and see how long it's been. He's got the sun. But he waits, how, does it say, 7 days? So 7 days, he's waiting. You're looking out. What is he waiting for? Does he think the dove's gonna come back? Why would he think the dove would come back? It's not like he can talk to the dove and give him marching orders, I suppose he's thinking, well, if the dove doesn't come back, that means the dove found land. So I'm just gonna wait it out. And here comes this dove, picks an olive branch. So he gets this intermediate communication between, you can go ahead and land now, because there's land out there that you can land on. And it's all water. And that is, there's land out there, but not yet. Or you're not close to it yet. So this dove comes back, and then the story keeps going.
Been pretty interested. The first thing after checking on, he went 40 days after God set the ark down on the mountain. Waited another 40 days, sent the raven out. The raven didn't come back. Because that means he could land someplace because there was, trees or whatever was still visible, he could land on. He never comes back, and then waits another 7 days, sends the dove out. And then he comes back every he basically comes right back after saying he can't. Even though he can land in trees himself or whatever was there. And then he waits another 7 days. And then he sends it out and brings back an hour left, waits another 7 days. So, but from the time they landed on the mountain, about 2 months later, God opens up the door so they can get out. So, I mean, basically from that time on, the water receded pretty quickly compared to what it was, because it started 40 days, where water came from under, covered everything. That means they were rolled around for about 8 months or so. And all of a sudden they get land on the mountain, and 2 months later they're out of the ark again. So that allowed that water to recede pretty quickly. But
Yeah, I don't think it was,
he sent ravens out first, and he never even came back. Didn't even consider coming back, and then he sends the dove out and he comes back. So
What was the elevation of Ararat? Because obviously it's gonna dry higher up before it
are we
dries.
assuming that it's the
Well,
one in
no.
Turkey?
I'm just curious. Just wondering.
And when it says 7th month and 10th month, is that like from the beginning of the flood?
That's what I think, yeah.
16,000 feet.
Not necessarily that they were at the top of the mountain. Assuming this is the one, which I have no,
Well, yeah, but obviously the elevation where they landed is higher than the elevation of the valleys.
Yeah.
Where they're gonna end up.
yeah, and we're back to, the earth has been re-terraformed, if you will. You had one kind of earth before. Now it's all been broken up, in my opinion, and you have a different situation under your feet. And so you have, maybe mountains and valleys and so forth now, and oceans. So this water is, it's not so much that is it that the water runs down off of, or that the land is now coming up, or is it some combination of both? I have no idea. It doesn't matter, but my hunch is that we suddenly have, I don't know, I don't have any idea. I mean, some of it, does it run back into the water comes up out of the earth, the fountains of the great deep are opening up, they come, and now are they going to run back down in, but not all the way? I have no idea, but that's the nature of instability. Let's see. Oh, do you want to finish the application thing there? That's what I think.
No, I just think that as we look at scripture, you got the text, what's God saying to us, his implication, and then someplace along the line, you have to say, what does it mean? So what? You have to go, so what? Is it just narrative for informational purposes, Or is there something here that I can take and live out my life? That's all.
We have the same creator he did,
Absolutely.
and we're under the same, mandates and, promises that he was, well, and a few more promises that have been added since. He waited yet another 7 days. Again, he sent out the dove from the ark. The dove came to him toward evening, and behold, in a beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So no one knew that the water was abated from the earth. Then he waited yet another 7 days and sent out the dove. She did not return to him again. So that dove found resting place. So Noah rests. Noah, the name means rest, rests on the mountain. And then he sends out a dove who can't find rest, and then can't find, and then finds rest. That's a good point. Yeah. Did he send one dove out or two? It only says he sent one, but that doesn't mean he only sent one.
Obviously, they found each other. They have doves and ravens.
Well, he sent out another raven someplace too.
Yeah, he's got seven.
yeah.
He's got 7 pairs to work with.
Oh, yeah.
Close to the year, they probably had more, they probably had more, babies themselves, so there's probably,
That's true too.
considerably many ravens and many doves by the time that year, came about.
This dove was earmarked. This is a very special dove.
Does that mean that's why we have home pigeons, they know how to go from one place to another?
Okay, you don't hear from God except through the presence of the dove. Let me look at my notes more often. Ravens are scavengers. They're gonna find food everywhere. It's a raven-rich environment. It's a,
Roadkill.
man, famines can be that way too, like, droughts, dry seasons and the African plain can be that way. The scavengers feast because there's all these dead animals everywhere.
Which was it a week ago, Gary, we talked about what happened to all the corpses? And the raven had to find some kind of, so there had to be some kind of,
Yeah. Well, you're gonna find all this stuff floating in the water. It's gonna be,
and my thought, I think I mentioned, well, we had the sea people, the sharks and everything
Yeah.
else, we eat some of it.
yeah.
A lot of fish that got cut up in a small pool of water that went right up.
Oh,
Well,
that's true.
yeah, you're right, Robert.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay. Let's move on to 13. I don't have any more to say about that. 13 through, I didn't mark these off. 13 through somewhere I'll decide at the moment. Now it came about in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Only after the earth is dry do we hear from God. Now God finally speaks again. So he pauses, he doesn't say anything. He commands Noah before, and now he's going to speak again. He commands Noah in chapter 6. Now he's going to speak again. Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Actually, let's look at that. 7. Where does God speak here? Doesn't God speak in chapter 7? The Lord said, enter the ark. So in chapter 7, the last thing he says begins with enter the ark in chapter 7. And then I don't think he speaks again after that. And then the first thing he says in chapter 8 is go out of the ark. Enter the ark in chapter 7, verse 1, go out of the ark in chapter 8, verse 15. You, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you, bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, very reminiscent of the story of creation, that they may breed abundantly on the earth. And here it's really explicit, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So the mandate in chapter 1 is repeated in chapter 8. Be fruitful and multiply. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. There you see the twice told element. God tells them to do it right here. And then it says Noah did it word for word right here. Every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by their families from the ark. Now he uses this word family, which would imply what somebody said about breeding on the ark. I don't know. I don't know that we've seen that word before. 2 by 2 they went in. Now they come out by families.
Question. Why did God send the raven? Why did, or I'm sorry, why did Noah send the raven? Why did Noah send the dove? When he waited until God told him to leave the ark.
Why not just tell them?
Yeah, why not just wait for God's instruction?
Well, I mean, the guy could, every day could have been speaking to.
Could have, yeah, we don't- this is
said-
just what we have, you're right, like, yeah,
recorded it.
This is all we have, but you see, I wonder.
Yeah, so do I, yeah. And you're not gonna get any answers to those
No,
questions.
No, I'm still wondering.
Yeah, we talk about that sometimes, people, they have questions about that they want to take into the text. And the text isn't really gonna answer that question, isn't designed to answer that question. So you try to force an answer out. And it almost always ends badly. And I really pay attention to what kind of questions people ask of the text, even when I'm listening to people. So my sort of biblical studies tool for that is don't bang your head against the wall. Find out what questions the text is meant to answer and ask those questions. And if you're asking other questions, you're asking the wrong questions. Because either the text is going to give you an answer to your question or it isn't.
I think that was just a real polite reprimand.
No, not at all. No, I do this all the time. I speculate on these things and then I get done speculating. I think, okay, that's right. I have to speculate because it wasn't going to answer that question, right? I do it in front of, I do it here. I've done it many, many times here. You just acknowledge that at the end, you're not going to get an answer to that question. And that's why I say things like I did a week or two ago. That's for the great press conference at the Sky. It's a big, long list, a big, long list of questions that I have that God did not condescend to answer in the text. Noah's successful navigation of the flood has nothing to do with his seamanship or navigation skills. Because there's nothing to navigate to. So even the fact that he found the land, you can float on the ocean a long time, you're not gonna find any land. Just saying. So, the fact that they found land at all was providential in the extreme.
Well, that's why I said last week, I'm sure God had his hand guiding them. And then they sit them right down, that's why they didn't go.
Yeah.
On rent, it says that generally they generally landed on dry land. But I'm sure, because you're talking about a earth that's totally filled with water. You never know where you're gonna, we don't, it doesn't even tell us that if they floated, that were kind of stayed, because even even in an ocean, you can just sit there for days without moving,
Or you can go this way and then come back again and,
or who knows?
yeah.
God doesn't reveal himself in this text exactly what happened, that's why it's, I think he could have been talking to him for every day and communicating with him. I can't imagine God just saying, okay, you go in the ark, I'm not gonna speak to you again until I tell you to get out,
But he communicates in a lot of ways though.
Yeah.
It's just, so how does that work today? Because you want to say, and I've talked about this before. I sensed God leading me to do something. Do I believe you? I mean, why would, okay, what is that like? Or did you just do that thing? And then it turns out that, do you have to know that it's God's will for you to do it in order for you to do it? You have to know God's will for you in order for you to do God's will. And if you have to know God's will, if you have to know that it's God's will, I know this is God's will for me. How do you know that? How do you know that you know? I mean, we're humans. I mean, we're given to self-deception every moment of our lives. You count on his providential presence and you, to some extent, you do the thing that seems like the right thing to do. And then here we go. And in retrospect, looking back on it, you can go, man, I can really see God working this and that. But beforehand, we're just terrible at anticipating the next step.
Was it Friesen who wrote the book, Decision Making in the Will of God?
I think I've heard of that, but I've never read it. I don't.
Basically, his premise is God through his word gives us parameters which are his will.
Yes,
So as long as we're operating within those parameters, within that box,
yeah.
then God gives us freedom to discern what the next steps are.
And he can direct and move
Mhm.
in ways that we don't. Look at the disciples. What did they know about the apostles? You know, Peter, James, and John and so forth. This seems like did they pray about it? Here comes Jesus. Here comes John the Baptist. You have James, you have, were all four of them disciples of John? Peter, Andrew, James, and John. All four of those were disciples of John. Why? Did they pray about it and felt God leading them to be, or did they just sense God's presence in this person and they were drawn to it? And then John said, that's the man. And they said, okay. And they probably sensed God's, but you know, what did they know? All they knew some things. But everything about us is fallible. We have nothing about us that's infallible except the indwelling spirit. But we don't know, he's mysterious. You do not know the ways of God. He does, and that's all that's necessary. You just live in faith. And he will, that's what this man is doing right here. Just living in faith and counting on the presence of this all-powerful God, who, if you don't step in and do something, I'm finished. And that's my demonstration of faith. There it is.
And faith always leads us forward, never backwards.
That's right.
Say something about that this morning.
You are?
At least that's the plan.
Okay. So they go out. Let's see. The big moment. The flood lasted exactly. So we have the dry land reappearing, just like Genesis chapter 1. The number of parallels between this story and Genesis 1 and 2, there's not endless, but there's many, many more than you first perceive when you read the text, if you think about it. But so now that the dry land has appeared, we get the mandate, the same exact mandate: be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and so on and so forth. That's exactly what happens here as well. The flood lasted exactly 1 solar year, 17th day, 2nd month, 600th year, to the 27th day, 2nd month, 1st year of the 601st year. I didn't do the math, but I'm taking the commentator that I got this from probably 10 years ago. I think it was Victor Hamilton. Victor Hamilton's commentary on Genesis was the one I was reading at the time. That's a great commentary. Let's see. It's the only time God spoke to Noah after Noah entered the ark. He's going to speak again, but he's not going to be speaking to Noah. To Tom's point, he doesn't leave the ark until he has permission. He stays in the ark, which seems like a good idea. And then now at this point, he is waiting for, I mean, the ark, God could have had a big wave come up, dump over the ark and dump everybody out. And then they could figure out, okay, I guess we're supposed to leave the ark now. But at this point, God steps back into the narrative. I told you to enter the ark, you shut the door. Now I'm telling you to leave the ark, and he's going to open the door, and they're all going to walk out. All right, a little bit farther. Actually, when I get this. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. Interesting. You know, Abraham's gonna get to Canaan, he's gonna build an altar at Bethel, it'll be his first altar. Noah gets out of the ark, first thing he does, recorded, is build an altar. You can't get a stronger a stronger indication of, it's a moment of thanksgiving, right? After a year of this, Noah understands what it's all about and how it happened, and so his first action, he didn't go out and build a shelter, you know, or find food or any of that, all of which I would have understood. If he decided, we gotta find water, fresh water, where are we gonna find fresh water? There's no houses, we gotta build houses, we gotta do all this, but that doesn't happen, it's the altar. The Lord, Noah built an altar to the Lord, the reoccurrence now of Yahweh, the covenant name for God right there, don't miss it, all caps. So he's God, he's God right here, he's God in chapter 15, in verse 15. But the covenant God reappears for the covenant promise, if you want to think of it as a covenant. I think we hooked this up with the covenant that God established with Noah. That works for me, that's fine. But now the author uses the covenant name for God. Of course, it's the one revealed to Moses that would be within the confines of the covenant with Abraham. But anyway, then Noah built an altar to the covenant-making God. Let's just say that. The God who makes and keeps covenants. Took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled the soothing aroma. Now we're getting back to the discussion about appeasement. And the Lord said, so that's now the third time, the covenant-making God said. So the covenant God, Noah built an altar to the covenant-making God. The covenant-making God smelled the soothing aroma of the sacrifices, and the covenant-making God swore to himself. Not to Noah, but to himself. That's exactly what he's going to do with Abraham as well. I will never again curse the ground on account of man. And here's the reaffirmation of Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually, lest you think, oh, great, we get to start all over with a better class of human. Okay, I get it. Noah was a better class of human, so he produced better offspring, and we're going to have a much better human race. That gets wiped away. The author makes sure you're never going to think that, because wound up in the reason that that God is going to need to make this promise to himself is precisely because that fact remains. Man is evil from his youth.
I like the way the ESV translates that. And it says, and the Lord said in his heart. Okay. Brings it for me close.
Is that the same, man is evil from his youth? Is that the way it says it in ESV?
The ESV says, and when, verse 21, and when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground.
Read the rest of it. For
I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth.
so they use the same, very similar language to chapter 6, verse 5. Let's go back and look at that real quick. If only Becky was here today to watch me finish a chapter in Genesis in 2 weeks.
We'll all verify that it happened.
Verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Then in chapter 8, post-flood, that ain't changed. So you could say to yourself, why then have the flood? Well, we could talk about that. Maybe I would talk about it now. Maybe the point of it is maybe the meaning of it, subject matter, you get to read this. What's the meaning of it? Maybe the meaning of it is from this day forward, the very existence of man, the continued existence of man, including up to this day, rests on the grace of God and his promise. But you should have been wiped out a long time ago. So this has implications for what about the person who's never heard, you know, all that kind of stuff. Every single human owes their very existence to this day to God's grace manifested in this promise to himself.
And God's mercy. God's grace giving to man what he doesn't deserve. God's mercy not giving to man
Right.
what he does deserve.
Yes.
And,
But that day's coming.
yeah, oh, yeah,
The wrath, all this really did was stay his wrath a while. The wrath is postponed, but the day of wrath is coming.
So when, in this day of wrath, the earth is going to, the elements are gonna melt. Are there gonna be people there?
Redeemed.
What?
Redeemed.
Redeemed.
This creation is going to be, he's gonna reclaim it. There's another word I'm looking for. But he's gonna redeem it. That's
No,
that's
the living
Roman.
things aren't gonna be destroyed.
I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And the old heaven and the old earth disappeared. It's passed away. Yeah, it's reinvigorated. That's a bad word. From the inside out in this cosmic act of redemption. Redemption is more than your salvation. Redemption is the reclaiming of the creation itself from what man did to it through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ.
So I was thinking something in Peter.
death, resurrection, and kingship.
And kingship and reign of Jesus Christ. That's right. That's right. But this idea, it's Romans 8, the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. It was not subjected to futility for no reason, but it was in hope that the creation itself would be set free. There's the great phrase for redemption, the great jubilee, set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the sons of God. And that's all future tense. That's the day of salvation. It's salvation for the whole thing. I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. And then the translation takes this to be some kind of poetic statement. While the earth remains, maybe this is something we should remember more often than we do. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So now we have continuity, but only because of the promise of God.
But I think also in the fact that some of that stuff before the flood probably didn't happen, they probably didn't have winter. So we.
Yeah, the seasonal,
basically,
yeah.
We kind of got the 4 seasons after the flood. Go about, I mean, day and night, they're the same, summer and winter. You know, before that, it could have been always summer, who knows, you know, I don't know that, but.
If you're right, then the first 3 are the new condition. Because he adds day and night. That did exist. There's evening and morning and first day,
You know, but
right?
cold, heat,
But the rest of that stuff. But in that sense,
Would have had seed time and harvest, because I'm sure that's the way they had.
not if you connect, if you're right, not if you connect it with the idea of seasonal. All 3 of those have a seasonal element to them. I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. We can talk about that.
It just kind of popped in my mind too, when I was reading it.
That's why I love just to read scripture, because of the thoughts that come to us.
Over and over again.
Mhm.
So sacrifice precedes again the Mosaic law. It's just there. What'll happen, which I talked about, I think last Wednesday night. What happened with Moses was sacrifice became codified and formalized as a condition, on a maintenance schedule for the people of God. But it was always there. So when it comes, nobody's going to be, it's not a new thing to them. The humans had been conditioned to offer sacrifices since Cain and Abel. So is this a sacrifice of atonement? Thanksgiving, it's a burnt offering. He calls it a burnt offering. Well, a burnt offering, that's an atoning sacrifice. I mean, it's not one or the other. But it's at least that Noah is aware. He is saying in the midst of this, man is evil from his youth, while Noah is offering a burnt offering. And so you get this picture of that's the kind of thing that's going to have to take place for mankind now to have relationship with God at this point. There's gonna be these burnt offerings to atone for, to cover in some sense, this evil in the heart that's gonna manifest, that's gonna continually manifest itself.
I think it's pretty interesting too. I mean, we kind of said something about this back in chapter 6, when he had clean and unclean animals in the center of the yard. And then all of a sudden, he's only sacrificing the clean animals and the clean birds, which basically wasn't established till God Mosaic covenant.
To Moses, yeah.
of what was clean, what was non-clean.
Well, he seems to know what clean and unclean is.
So,
Now let's close with a little comparison to the Near Eastern flood stories. The gods are hungry. They haven't eaten. So you offer the sacrifice so the gods can eat. That's the kind of thing we don't believe about our God. He doesn't have need. He does not have need of your sacrifice. Noah isn't feeding his hungry God because the earth was covered with water so the gods couldn't eat. That's what's not happening. So this is again anti-mythological. There's nothing in here about God needing to eat this, needing this sacrifice. It just happens and he smells, he doesn't eat it, he smells the soothing aroma. And he remembers, he makes a promise to, that happens a lot with the soothing aroma thing. God either remembers his promise or he makes a promise in the soothing aroma.
I would say that one of the reasons Noah did this is thank God. He's very.
Yes,
thankful.
that's, I was gonna say the other half of the atonement idea would be Thanksgiving, worship and so, and it's not one or the other. But anyway. Say in the other flood myths, I call them myths because I think they are based in a historical event. But you get this description of God swarming around the sacrifices like flies. Because they're famished. It's been a long time since they ate. Okay, let's go ahead and stop there. We're almost done with, I got a little more to say about 8, but we'll pick it up next time. Now to talk about appeasement a little bit more. Anybody want the last word? No? I think I cut people off less often this week. I cut people off last week, specifically Mike and Tom.
I'm sorry.
I cut you off. I was listening to the feed this morning and I cut you off last week. I cut him off too. Okay, I'm gonna get shut down. Thanks, Naomi, Nate, Gabe.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Gabe.
Thank
All right.
you.